Now to the George Zimmerman trial. Neighbors gave dramatic and crucial testimony on Friday, including John Good, who said he saw Trayvon Martin on top of Zimmerman moments before Zimmerman shot Martin. Listen.
All right. If you could you tell at that time, in terms of describing who was on top and who was on the bottom?
I could only see colors of clothing.
Okay. The color of clothing on top, what could you see?
It was dark.
Okay. How about the color of clothing at the bottom?
I believe it was a light white or red color.
Joining me now is CNN legal analyst Paul Callan in New York and CNN legal analyst Mark NeJame in Orlando, Florida. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, we know that Trayvon was wearing a black hoodie the night he was killed, and Zimmerman was wearing a bright red jacket. And the witness also made it clear the light-skinned person was on the bottom during the fight. So, Paul, let me ask you first. You're a former prosecutor. How damaging is this testimony to the state?
This was a very damaging blow to the state. I mean, the state's entire case seems to have been driven off the side of a cliff this week. They started strong, of course, in their opening, but this witness, John Good in particular, he's close to the scene. He's the closest witness. He's got Trayvon Martin on top of Zimmerman, and he really puts in play the self-defense claim in a major, major way. It's very hard for me to imagine how the prosecutor is going to be able to counter this, since he's the closest eyewitness that will ever be available to what actually happened that night.
Mark, what do you think?
No, without question. And a lot of people are wondering why the prosecutor went ahead and called him anyway. I have to tell you, I think it was a good strategic move on behalf of the prosecutor, because this witness was on the defense witness list and was going to come out anyway. So I think that the prosecutor, knowing that this very credible witness was going to be extremely damaging, at least wanted to call him first so he could kind of put his own spin on it and at least minimize the damage as much as possible, and also maintain credibility before the jurors by showing that he wasn't hiding anything. But nevertheless, it was a devastating blow. And remember, this is the state's case. This is when it's all supposed to be going their way. And now, with such reasonable doubt being injected in this case, it's going to be a very hard climb for the prosecutor to get around and go over.
Okay, Paul, another state witness, Lindsay Folgate, a physician assistant, addressed Zimmerman's head injuries. The state's goal to point out those injuries were not life-threatening, so Zimmerman should not have used deadly force. What do you think? Do these images and the testimony prove that for the state?
Well, it's an interesting question, but I think there's a misconception that a lot of people have about this. Self-defense says that if you think that you are that you're going to be seriously hurt or killed, that you can use deadly physical force to protect yourself. It's not really a standard of were you actually seriously injured. It's what you perceive that night. And Zimmerman's claim, of course, is that his head was being pounded onto the cement. His nose had been broken. I was just going over his statement to the police again. One of the things he says is that with Trayvon Martin on top of him, his nose broken, he was pressing down on his nose, and Zimmerman was fearful that he would have trouble breathing. Now, these pictures, of course, would support that claim. Even though he was in fine shape the next day, the defense is going to say, hey, it's what's going through your mind on that rainy night. I understand why the prosecutor called the witness. It's all they have, and they've got to put it forward, but they've got a tough, tough case with an uphill battle, and they're struggling, I think, Allison.
Yeah, Mark, what do you think? Because this was supposed to be the big opening week for the prosecution, and they've clearly had trouble this week. How can they sort of bounce back? What's really key?
Well, I've said from the beginning that this was going to be a challenging case for the state, and it's exactly right. It's not an objective standard, it's a subjective standard. What did the victim in any self-defense case who's making that claim reasonably believe? Did they reasonably believe that they were in fear of death or great bodily harm? And so if they're able to establish that that's what was in their mind and that fear was reasonable, then how does anybody really get around that? I also think that you're going to see that the defense is going to do everything possible to make their case, showing reasonable doubt in the state's case, to do everything possible to keep George Zimmerman off the stand, because that's where they could run into some trouble, because he has given a variety of statements at different times, and that would be a prosecutor's dream to get him on the stand. So I think you're going to see the defense continuing to dissect this case, throw enough reasonable doubt out there where they are able to not put George Zimmerman on the stand when it becomes their time to put on their case.
Okay, Mark NeJame, Paul Callan, thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you.